What's good, everybody? We are here for the latest statistical changes for everything going on in real estate in the city of Surrey. This is the entire city of Surrey combined, and we're doing this for the month of November 2025. So I've got some really interesting things to share with you today. You're going to want to make sure you definitely hang around to the end because I'm going to show you some numbers that I think are going to surprise you. So, a couple of things. Where are we in the state of the land? Well, we just came off the heels of a Bank of Canada rate cut. So the overnight lending rate was about 2.5%. Well, it wasn't about, it was 2.5%. And they removed a quarter point off that. So now we're operating in an environment where the overnight lending rate, this is the rate that the banks borrow the money at, is at 2.25%. So anybody that was going to get a variable rate mortgage or anybody that is on a variable rate mortgage just saw some, pretty decent savings. They're not huge, but they're certainly better than nothing. We've also seen fixed rates come down in the last short while. So you can now quite comfortably get a 5-year mortgage under that 4% mark. And that's quite a psychological barrier that is going to be very, very useful for people as they consider buying a home, especially going into 2026. So I've got some really neat things, like I said, I want to get into here with you. So let's start and jump right into it. Now, when we're talking about numbers, just a reminder, we are going to be discussing numbers through the lens of the home price index, where we're going to be talking about the benchmark pricing. So this is a very fancy algorithm put together for us for UBC, where we're looking at the typical home and how it is changing value month over month. So I want you to think about this a little bit like inflation. Our house prices kind of going up. Are they going down? Where are they moving? And we're also going to talk about what's impacting those. Now, you've seen this graph before, and what this is showing you, and if we kind of go right in on the very right-hand side of there, the blue bar that's very quite high, well, what that represents is new listings coming to the market year to date. And you can see it's one of the highest year, if not the highest year, since this has been tracked since 1990. So obviously having lots of listings, that's certainly a good thing for home buyers, but it makes it quite challenging for home sellers. When you go down to the red line, that is the amount of properties that are actually transacting on the market. So you've got ultra high listings available and you've got ultra low listings actually selling, which makes for quite the opportunity for a home buyer and a challenging market for a home seller. Now, here's what's going on. And this is something new for this slide deck that we haven't really done before. But I wanted to show you a little bit about where things are trending because, a lot of people like to kind of put doom and gloom on the market and really just, what's going on with the facts and stats. And you can be the purveyor of what you actually think is going on in the market. But it's important to know that we've been in this environment where real estate prices have come down. Mortgage rates have continuously been getting cheaper and cheaper. There's lots of inventory to choose from. And the question seems to be, well, when do buyers start to react to all that? When do they start to react and recognize opportunity and say, you know what, there's things and chances and opportunities that exist today that maybe didn't exist at this time last year. And what we're starting to see is there actually is indeed lots of people starting to recognize those opportunities and start to take them. So to put that into perspective a little bit, in the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board, which is North Delta, basically all the way to Abbotsford, sales have climbed for the second straight month in October, which it says a sign that some buyers may be responding to steadily easing prices. Now, here's two very interesting things. Month over month, sales in the Fraser Valley were up 17%. That's not a little number. That's not like a 2% or a 3%, 17% up month over month. Worth noting, we're coming out of a pretty nasty market where it was very, very challenging to sell a home. Still is challenging to sell a home, but a 17% month over month increase. And that's coming off of a month that was also heavily improved from the month prior. So we're still 16% below where we were at this time last year before all this crazy stuff going on in the world was necessarily happening, but 17% month over month. And to add to that, new listings are down for the month of October. They're down not by a little bit, they're down by 14%. So what you've got is instead of having this huge gap between the amount of places that are selling and the amount of places that are available, it closed at the top and it closed on the bottom just a little bit. So that is making things ever so slightly a little tighter in terms of getting the market back to maybe a little bit more of a balanced state, or even starting to push it into the favor of sellers, depending on what market you're looking at. So that said, This is generally what's happened with the benchmark prices for all property types. The red line at the top there represents the greater Vancouver market, which is like Vancouver and Richmond and Burnaby, the Tri-Cities, that sort of stuff. Maple Ridge, Whistler's actually in there, that sort of stuff. And then you've got the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board at the bottom with blue. Now, that's all properties kind of thrown into a blender and spitting out what's going on. But let's really take a look at the individual product types for Surrey now. So condominiums, you'll recall the red line on this graph. If you didn't know, that represents a balanced market condition. And what you can see is condos have started to trend upwards into a balanced market condition, but they're not quite there yet. So we're still in and around that 13 to 14% sales to active ratio, which means you got roughly about 1 out of 7, maybe 1 out of 8 properties that are actually coming to the market transacting. Now, different markets in Surrey, Surrey is one of the biggest municipalities in Canada, are doing different things. So the Wally condo market versus the South Surrey condo market, as an example, are both telling very, very different stories. So that's why you definitely want to get a very local perspective on what your real estate plans might be, because they can all be different. This is just the city of Surrey as a whole. In terms of pricing and benchmark pricing, we've seen the prices soften, but they've began to flatten out a little bit. If you follow this channel and you follow these presentations, you'll know that I do believe that the home price index, what I'm showing you right now, does tend to follow the market reality and lag behind about 2 months. That's been my reflection in doing this for years and years and years. So, but interesting to see where we are, maybe come January and see exactly what it's showing on this home price index. But it is showing that the prices did go down ever so slightly, but not by a ton. So when I say not by a ton, well, month over month, it was about a $3,200 change for condominiums, and year over year, you're down about $32,000 according to the home price index. So naturally, as you have been led to or imagine, that the advantage for this market is for the buyers. Now, you're going to want to consider a few things. If you're someone who's maybe new to buying a home, you're new to getting in the market, number one, that is, what is your monthly rent? If you've spent, let's say 24,000, let's say you've spent 30,000, whatever that number might be. If you're spending $2,000 a month on rent, you've spent $24,000 in a year, giving that to your landlord to pay their mortgage. So if you are somebody that's renting, even with these softening market conditions where prices have gone down a little bit, had you have bought, 6 months ago, a year ago, you'd be putting that money towards your mortgage rather than giving it to your landlord. So something to always consider. We've talked a lot about new construction being stalled as well. There's been lots of articles coming out about how developers have been having massive trouble selling off some of their units in these new construction buildings and whatnot across the Lower Mainland, not just limited to Surrey. So there is going to be some really big opportunity for newer properties. One thing to note too is the government is still talking about removing GST on new construction properties, and that is still something that is being, it was in the most recent budget as an example, they were still talking about it. It's something that does look like it's going to happen. That's going to have quite an impact on new construction. So for somebody that's maybe considering investing, or somebody that is considering getting into the market and they want something a little bit new, that's something to certainly watch out for. And for somebody that is maybe looking at selling a resale property that's relatively new, or even buying a resale property that's relatively new, that is going to have an impact on those properties. To give you a little perspective, if you had a 2024 condominium and the GST is removed on the 2025 brand new condominium, well, buyers naturally are going to go after that new one rather than go after the 2024 one if the prices aren't significantly different. So the 2024 ones are now going to have to consider adjusting to actually attain a sale. So it's going to be a very interesting dynamic to see how that plays out, but it's going to create some real opportunity for some and some real headaches for others. So we did a video all about that on our channel, YouTube channel, if you want to check that out and find that there. Always be careful on timing the market. If you need a place to live, there's lots of things to think about. And one thing I wrote here as well, this is new this month, is that sales are up. So specifically in Surrey, the sales numbers for just sales generally are quite a bit up, and that's not unique. That's obviously something that's happening across the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board as well. So I wanted to show you this as an example. This is condominiums in the city of Surrey, and you can see on the bottom right there just the significant jump in sales sales over the last 2 months. So there's 140 transactions that have happened when we were kind of floating a little bit closer to about 115, 120 previously. So people are starting to recognize that there is opportunity out there. Now, getting into townhomes, the sales to active ratio here shows that we are in a balanced market and trending towards a seller's market. So we finally entered back into this territory where this means there's no real advantage to either buyer or seller under the current conditions. A nice place comes up, you better act on it. It will go. That doesn't mean everything's flying off the market, though, certainly. And some things are going to sit and have to experience price adjustments, but the good ones are going to move, and they will typically move fast because there's more people out there looking for homes than just one person typically. So home price index, now that's showing me that the prices have softened month over month. No surprise there. So month over month, it actually says they're down about $12,000, which seems a little aggressive considering year over year, they're down about $57,000. So that's obviously a really big chunk month over month, but nonetheless, that's what the data is telling us. So the advantage in a market like this is really to nobody. The balance is there. You got roughly about 1 out of 6, 1 out of 5 properties that are going to the market transacting. And that's a relatively healthy market. That's actually where we want it to be typically as a homeowner. We don't want the market going down. We don't necessarily want the market going up because that makes it unaffordable for people to buy and then stalls out the real estate market. But when it's healthy and everybody has equal opportunity, we're in a much better market condition. So the balanced market is back. This is going to be the market to watch. It is the missing middle. It's the perfect market for those millennial families that are starting to have kids that need more space, and they also require affordability and have certain needs in a home, and townhomes are the ones that offer that. So we'll have to keep watching that, and we're gonna have to kind of watch the fall market here as well, because with condo sales improving, naturally when condos sell, people that are moving up are going to start buying into townhomes. So that the condo sale is kind of like the domino that starts knocking down the rest of the market. So it'll be interesting to see if sales continue to improve in the townhome sector as well. Getting over to detached. Now, detached has been by far one of the more challenging markets everywhere, and in Surrey, that is certainly the same case. So you can see we're at roughly about a 10% sales to active ratio, which means about 1 out of 10 homes that are coming to the market are actually transacting each month, and that's a very difficult market, very challenging for a seller, which is going to result in price softening. So we've certainly seen that happening in the detached market ever since about the spring of 2025, and month over month, detached homes are down about $8,500, and year over year, they're down about $104,000. So there's been a big change in terms of what's been going on with detached homes. Now, that market clearly is an advantage for the buyers. There's tons of inventory to choose from. Don't be afraid to shoot your shot. Don't be afraid to go out there and write your offers, because the sellers in these market conditions are still relatively fearful. Now, they can choose to sell for whatever they want, but the ones that are actually serious about selling, their concern is that the prices may be a little bit cheaper tomorrow than they are today. So, you might get a little bit of a better negotiation with them and have the opportunity to bring the price down a little bit better in a market condition like this than when sellers start to feel a little more optimistic, which I don't think quite is there yet. If you're somebody that's selling your property, we've talked about this before, but hopium is not a strategy. Hoping things are going to get better is not a strategy, because the fact of the matter is nobody knows what the market's going to do tomorrow. We can provide you with the data, and we can provide you with what it looks like it might do, but certainly, we live in a world of uncertainty. It takes one person tweeting something stupid to change the whole economy. So hopium is certainly not a strategy. If you're serious about transacting your home, you need to look at what you're competing against and position your home appropriately, especially financially with the price. The prices are going to continue to remain challenged here, at least for now. I don't see this necessarily changing in the short term, so something to keep an eye on. Like I said, put your offers out there. Now, what's going on with market drivers here? We have another mortgage rate announcement coming on December 10th. Kind of, who knows what's going to come out of that necessarily. If you're unfamiliar with these rate announcements and how they actually affect the type of mortgage that most people choose, which is the fixed mortgage, we just did a video on that on our YouTube channel as well. So you can definitely check that out, because it is interesting. A lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about how those impact each other, those two things. But nonetheless, we do have a rate announcement coming out on the 10th. We're still waiting on a trade deal. Hopefully there's no no more videos coming out of Ontario that stop negotiations. But I mean, who knows how far negotiations were even going anyways? Nobody knows, right? Except for the people doing them. But hopefully that's something that we can expect in the near future. We know the demand is crazy pent up. There's a lot of people out there. And as we showed you earlier, there's a lot of people starting to recognize the opportunities in the market, which I'm going to show you in a moment here. Seasonal trends, we are getting into the slower time per year now. So as we get nearer to Christmas, that's when the market starts to kind of tighten up a little bit. Everything seems to kind of slow down. And then the next busiest market kind of tends to happen in and around February and ramps up right until June. That's the fall market, and usually the busiest real estate season of the year where the most properties transact. And there's been no local policy changes, thank goodness, to talk about, at least as of right now. The government has left real estate alone, is letting the market do what it needs to do. Now, the one thing I wanted to show with you, or show to you rather, is that what is being projected to happen in 2026. Now, I find this ultra interesting. So what you're looking at right here is 2022 all the way to 2025 with a forecast for 2026. And this is coming from the British Columbia Real Estate Association, from their economy team. Now, what is really interesting here is they've got some big projections coming up for 2026. And let me give you a little bit of context here. The real estate industry really felt that 2025 was going to be the year of the rebound. It was going to be, the sales were going to come back. We've kind of been dealing with a really sluggish market, really challenging market conditions since 2022. And 2025 had all these signs that things were going to improve, they were going to be great. And then, of course, what happened down south and everything like that. Well, it's been a year, it's been the better part of a year, and people are used to this uncertainty. You can't put your plans on hold forever, that sort of thing. So the British Columbia Real Estate Association, they're projecting that next year in 2026, that sales across the province will be up about 12.8%, and that prices in British Columbia as a whole, will be up about 4%. Now, here's what's really interesting is if you take a good look at this graph and you focus in on the yellow section on the 2026 column, the one on the very right there, you can see how much bigger the orange column is there in 2026, the forecast versus 2025. And why is that? Well, that's because primarily the majority of those sales are going to be coming out of the Fraser Valley and Greater Vancouver, or the Lower Mainland area, which has been by far the most sluggish of all the areas in BC. It's been the most challenging. You can see a lot of the other ones are more or better. Rather, what am I trying to say? They're more so not, they haven't been quite as heavily impacted as the Lower Mainland has, for whatever reason. So while they said that sales would be up year over year by about 12.8%, in fact, in the Lower Mainland, that number is 21.7%. So a big increase expected for what's going to be happening in Lower Mainland properties in terms of sales. The price is projected to increase in the Fraser Valley as well, but it's only, or in the Lower Mainland rather, but it's only projected to go up about 1.1%, but price increases nonetheless. So you're going to have a lot more people likely transacting properties next year. So a lot of the sellers out there who have kind of been waiting for their chance to, get out of their property, and maybe they're not quite happy with what's going on and whatnot. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should expect big price increases, but it does mean that a lot more people are going to be out there transacting properties. So some of that opportunity out there for home buyers might be dissipating a little bit, and some of the chances to actually transact your property for anybody that's been trying to, or maybe planning to sell their home, are going to improve. So anyways, guys, that is it for this month. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions, anything you'd like to see in these videos, and don't forget to subscribe so you get everything you need when it comes to Surrey real estate, White Rock real estate, or anything going on in the wild world of British Columbia real estate. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next video. Cheers.